Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today on this very unique way of sharing my cookbook with you. I'm Lara Lyn Carter. I'm the author of Skinny Southern, and my new book just came out, Skinny Southern Baking, 100% gluten-free, refined sugar-free, and dairy-free, both sweet and savory recipes. I converted to gluten-free and refined sugar-free almost 4 years ago for health reasons, and being a chef and loving to cook, those home recipes that mean so much to me were one of the things that really inspired this cookbook. The foreword to the cookbook was written by my dear friend Mark Summers, who many of you probably are very familiar with. And the dedication is to the woman who gave me so much inspiration in the kitchen all of my life growing up. That's my Mimi. She was from Valdosta, Georgia, and she taught me so much about cooking. And the recipes that we are doing today are actually two of her recipes. We're going to do an apple spice cake, perfect for this time of the year, and we are going to make her cheese straws. Now, people ask me all the time, what was the first recipe you wanted to make clean? What did you miss that you couldn't give up? And my Mimi made cheese straws every year at Christmas. You always had them. She pretty much made them year round anyway, but you knew at the holidays you were going to have her cheese straws. And that was one of the things I missed so much. So that was one of the ones that I was determined to make perfect and keep and put in this cookbook so that I could keep those recipes of hers alive in this. My husband and I eat this way, and my children eat this way 24/7, 365 days of the year. So we have tailgating, birthday parties, holidays, and we don't miss a thing because the food is flavorful. We're not giving up anything. I promise you, when you taste the German chocolate cake or you taste my Mimi's cheese straws, you will never think about the fact that they are gluten-free, refined sugar-free, and dairy-free as well. So wherever you are, get your inspiration hats on and join me. We're going to get started with the apple spice cake. I've got beautiful apples that Melissa sent to me to use in this, and I like to use a sweet apple for this, so a Gala, Honeycrisp, something like that works really, really well. You don't want to use a sour apple. And I like to get ones too that have the soft skin, because I shred the apple and I don't have to peel it. I just put it right into the recipe and it just comes all together, and it's absolutely delicious. So again, thank you for joining me, and let's get started baking. Okay, I've about gotten my 2 cups of shredded apple that I need. And again, like I said, I love the fact that with this recipe, I don't even have to peel the apples. They will just bake right into the cake. They add moisture, and it's not like a bitter taste or anything like that. They're just absolutely delicious. And it usually takes about 2 apples to get the 2 cups, as long as they're average size. All right. Now let me wash my hands real quick, and we will get busy putting this cake together. This recipe can be found on page 45 in your cookbook. Now I have got 2 cups of almond flour. A lot of people, when they go gluten-free, for whatever reason, will just switch to gluten-free all-purpose flours. I don't do that because I like to control blood sugars and other things as well, which is another reason why I don't use refined sugars. Almond flour is one of my favorites to use, also coconut flour and others, because they don't cause the carb spike that you get with all-purpose flours. So even if you go gluten-free, if you want to help control your sugars, almond flour, coconut flour, some of the other alternative gluten-free flours are a really good place to start. And that's what you will find in this book, is that I use not the all-purpose ones, but the alternative ones. So I have 2 cups in here, and again, another great thing about this recipe, no mixing bowl. It's super, super easy. To that, I'm gonna add 1 cup of coconut sugar. And all of these ingredients you can find in your stores. They're not hard to find like they used to be. Sometimes you would have problems finding specific ingredients if you first converted to gluten-free or trying to find non-refined sugars. Now they're available everywhere. And then we have got a teaspoon of baking soda, and we have a 1/2 teaspoon of fine sea salt. Then I've got our cinnamon and our nutmeg already together in this, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of nutmeg. I love the combination of fall flavors, apple, nutmeg, cinnamon. It is what you think of when you think of fall. Perfect. So I'm just going to give these a quick little stir. And then we are going to add our wet ingredients, our apple, our 2 cups of shredded apple, And you can turn these into muffins. I make it like a little coffee cake because I like to cut it into triangles and, you know, eat it with a cup of coffee at night or for breakfast or whatever. Then we have 3 eggs at room temperature. Now that's another question I get a lot of times is why do I hear at room temperature when I see, you know, hear someone on television cooking or I read a recipe and they say, why room temperature? Well, the reason for that is because when you put this into the oven, if your eggs are ice cold, the oven has to cook things longer in order to get it heated up. And a lot of times that can cause things to dry out. So I always start out with room temperature eggs when I'm doing my baking. I also like this recipe because it's one you can let the kids get involved in. You don't have a heavy mixer. You don't even have to have a knife. You can just shred the apples. Dylan spends so much time in the kitchen with me. Both my older 2 boys, that's how they learn to cook. How do you work with your kids in teaching them how to cook? Cooking favorite recipes? What are some of your favorite things to do with them? And last, of course, you gotta have a little vanilla. So we are going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and I'm just eyeballing that. Then, this is ready for the oven. I mean, you cannot get any easier than this. No mixer, no heavy equipment of any kind, not a lot of steps, simple ingredients, but simply delicious. So this is going to go into a prepared cake pan that I've already greased with a little nonstick cooking spray, and it'll go into the oven for about 30 to 35 minutes in a 350-degree oven. And this is the pan that I like to use. You'll notice it's also the pan that's in the background in the cookbook. Because like I said, I like to cut it into little triangles like you're cutting a pie. But this, I mean, you could use this for anything during the holidays. As I mentioned, muffins. And they make such delicious dairy-free whipped creams now that you can whip up a little bit of that with some maple syrup in it to put on top of it. Spread that out. And this, again, 350-degree oven. Get every little bit of that in there. 350-degree oven for 30 to 35 minutes. The other thing about this is it will freeze absolutely beautifully. So that's always a plus as well. All right, for my Mimi's cheese straws, we are starting out once again with almond flour, 1 1/4 cup. And when you do this cheese straw recipe, you want to make sure that when you put that almond flour in the measuring cup that you pack it down really tight because we need these to be good and firm. So we have got 1 1/4 cup of that in there, packed firm. Then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of fine salt, a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. So we're going to have a little kick in here with this. And then we have got 5 tablespoons of plant-based butter that has been melted. And here again is one of those recipes that's not going to need a mixer or anything like that. And I'm just going to give that a quick little stir. What you want to do is get all that liquid in there. And this is, again, another one that you can get the kids involved with. I mean, this, every time I eat a cheese straw, I think of my grandmother and Christmas time. What recipes did y'all always do in your family at Christmas? I guess some of it depends on where you're watching from today, too. All right, scrape all that off. And 2 cups of plant-based cheddar cheese. And there are some really, really good ones out there. It used to be very hard to find a really good one that would melt and do what you wanted it to do and taste like cheese, and oh, but now they're so good. All right, here's where you gotta get a little messy. So it's time to get those hands in there, and you're literally gonna squish it. This is why I say this one's a good recipe for kids, because you can smush and squish. And you wanna get that cheese worked in to that almond flour. Now, if you don't want the little spice, you can omit that cayenne pepper, or you can cut back on it a little bit, whatever you want to do. I always love to serve these when I'm doing a bridal shower or a baby shower and top them with some strawberry preserves. All right, I'm going to wash up my hands, and then we'll get started putting them on our baking sheet. Okay, now it's time to put our cheese straws onto our baking sheet. Now, I love to use stone for baking with these gluten-free flours, it seems to work much better. If you don't have stoneware, you just use what you have, but please make sure you put parchment paper on there so that it helps cook it nice and crisp but won't allow it to burn and stick. So I've got parchment and I've got my stoneware pan. And this is one of those times where you use a tool that you normally wouldn't use. I always have a good time with kitchen gadgets anyway, but my Mimi always did this herself. She would use a melon ball scoop. That way they would all be the same size, and she would simply scoop them out onto the tray. Now I like to keep these 1.5 inches apart because they are going to spread with that cheese. So they're going to spread out, so you make sure you have good spacing between them. And then another little interesting thing, which she would take a fork, dip it in water, and then use the fork to press the cheese straw flat. And the little bit of water isn't going to affect the cheese straw or how it comes out. What it does is keep the fork from sticking to the cheese straw as you're trying to flatten them out. And this is another great job that kids like to do. Give them that fork and some water and let them smash it. Now I've got kind of a small tray right here, so I'm only going to get 9 on this first rack. So I'll get those going in the oven, and then I'll roll out some more. Press these down. Get these into the oven. I happen to be a very sentimental person, and so I wanted to point out a few things while everything's baking in the oven that are in this book and why they're in there, things that I used as props with the food photography. First of all, on the almond cookies, the book here, the Norman Rockwell Christmas book, that was given to me by my uncle when I was 7 years old, and every year on Christmas Eve we would read the same story out of it, and it's a tradition I've held through with my boys, and we read it every Christmas as well. So it has sentimental value to me, and I like seeing things that are important to me stay alive and come into a new life through the book. All right, the teacups here on this page with the shortbread cookies. Well, that happens to be something I collect, and this was the first one that I ever collected. And then, of course, you already have heard so much about my Mimi, but one of the things you may not know is that she was an avid bridge player. Twice a week, I mean, she was not going to miss, unless she was deathly ill, she was not going to miss her bridge appointments. And so every time she would have people over for bridge at her house, she always had this tablecloth that you see in the background of the cola cake. That was her bridge tablecloth. And I thought it was really neat, a neat look for that picture to bring that back to life. And then for the gingerbread, if you notice the carolers in the background, well, my mother always had those on the piano when I was growing up. She played Christmas music on the piano, and those were always the ones that she would set out on the piano. And last but not least, the jadeite plate that you see in this picture. That's the collection that was given to me by my mother-in-law. She started collecting it for me when my husband and I were first married. And so I like taking all of these little different elements that I have, things that I've collected, things that I really cherish, and putting them into my work. So I hope you enjoy that. Okay, while those finish baking, I want to go over a few of the things in the cookbook that I think are really, really important. First of all, non-refined sugars. Those are the sweeteners that I like to use because they don't elevate the blood sugars like refined sugars do. So maple syrup, honey, another one of my favorites that I have discovered over the last couple of years, date syrup and date nectar, sweet potato nectar, of course coconut sugar, you can even use agave, but they are all absolutely perfect. They're delicious non-refined sugars, but you're going to have to watch when you start experimenting with recipes on your own. If you're using a wet sweetener or a dry sweetener like the coconut, make sure that you plan and give yourself room for error. You can usually tell when you're mixing something together, is it too soupy or what? But almond flour, this is something that I will tell you a trick. There's always a secret behind a cookbook, especially one when you do the photography during COVID-19 quarantine. But almond flour actually is one of the best ones if you want to bake and put something in the freezer and save it for later. I made the German chocolate cake that is in this book during the holidays. I made several of them. I put one in the freezer just to test it. I had tested it with muffins and other things in the freezer, but I have a huge outdoor freezer, so I took an entire German chocolate cake in December, put it in the outside freezer, and left it until it was time to photograph the German chocolate cake recipe. So I pulled it out the day before, let it come down to room temperature. I didn't put it back in the refrigerator. I just let it sit out on the counter overnight. And the next day, when we cut into that cake, I could not believe it tasted literally like I had just taken it out of the oven and made it fresh that day. So you really might want to look into almond flour for future things, especially things that you like to put in the freezer and save for later dates. Just a fun little tip. Okay, everything is done. The apple spice cake is out of the oven. The top has got a little bit of texture to it. You can feel it. It feels a little bit crunchy on top. And then once you cut into it, all that moisture from the apples and of course the almond flour, it's just gonna be absolutely delicious. Another thing I like to do with the apple spice cake is if I'm gonna heat it up the next day, maybe for breakfast with a cup of coffee, once I slice it, I will put it under the toaster oven because I just like those little edges to be really crispy. So just a little trick and something I like to do. Perfect for any occasion, super easy. Again, get your kids involved. These are easy recipes, no heavy mixers, absolutely fun in the kitchen. Mimi's cheese straws are cooling. I love to use one of these racks to cool because if you leave them on the pan, then the pan keeps the heat underneath there, which can dry them out, and it can also cause moisture. So having a pan like this to put your cheese straws on to let them cool after you're done will help them cool all the way through because it allows air to go underneath. Great one to have. If you don't have one of these, grab one for your kitchen. You'll get a lot of use out of it. Thank you again for letting me share Skinny Southern Baking with you. I hope you enjoyed the book. Please let me know what your favorite recipes are. I'd love to hear what you think. Give the German chocolate cake a try. I promise you will not be disappointed. That's one of my favorites in here too. Thanks so much to Melissa's and enjoy baking. Happy holidays to all of you, and I hope you love the book. Bye.